So the term individual learning styles is, it's probably one of the most popular ideas in all of education. And it really isn't confined to the realm of elementary or secondary education because you hear about it in almost every kind of classroom or instructional setting. So the question was, what exactly are learning styles, or individual learning styles? Okay, so in short, they are the ways in which a person, or a student in this case, prefers to learn. And they're typically broken down into three broad categories, which would be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic tactile. A learning style is generally viewed as the way in which a student naturally learns new things. So, for example, you may learn something far easier by watching, say, a video instead of listening to a lecture. And in this case, we could assume that you're probably more of a visual learner rather than an auditory one. And when you talk about learning styles, it's typical to get into a discussion about something called multiple intelligence theory and so on. But just to keep it simple and for the sake of our discussion right now, I'm just going to stick with the general definition of individual learning styles, which is visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And it's not a stretch to recognize that everyone has a preferred method for taking in new information and learning. In fact, in your typical classroom, it's never a bad idea to present material in a variety of ways since, this can help to keep students focused and interested. Okay, well, that really depends on who you're talking to, because a learning style may be seen as simply the way in which someone prefers to learn. In other words, they can learn through just about any method or approach, but given the choice, someone may lean toward a particular method. And now others will tell you that a learning style is however someone is wired to learn. So if you're a kinesthetic learner, you'll probably always struggle to learn through more visual or auditory methods. And you might be able to get a little stronger in these areas, but for the most part, you'll always be at kind of a disadvantage. So the idea that each person has a particular learning style, it really seems on the surface to make a lot of sense. Because if you were to quickly think about how you prefer to learn new things, you'd probably and very easily categorize yourself. But the bottom line is individual learning styles really don't exist. So let me put it this way. Determining a student's learning style and then matching the teaching method to that child's particular way of learning doesn't actually lead to increased academic performance. And when I say this to people, they say, well, how can this be? Because after all, teachers and educators of all stripes, they talk about individual learning styles all the time. And as parents, you may have been told by your child's teacher, in fact, that he or she has a particular style of learning. And in fact, it seems that much of what is considered best practice in teaching involves proper consideration of each student's individual learning style. Well, I'd say first, because it just feels right. And second, we have a tendency to reason that since so many parents and educators talk about it, we assume it must be true. So think about that for a moment. Well-meaning educators, they're always searching for ways to increase student success. On top of that, we want students to enjoy learning and gain meaning from what they learn. So it's not hard to see that a frustrated or a discouraged student may not achieve great academic success, achievement, or enjoyment, or any meaning at all. So what do? Well, individual learning styles offers an explanation and a method. The problem is that the research that's been done on individual learning styles, it's either been poorly executed, it's weak or overreaching in its conclusions, or really it's just inconclusive. There are some studies that show small effects on learning outcomes, but really there isn't enough evidence to demonstrate that our schools should wholeheartedly adapt the curriculum in order to accommodate learning styles. And if you don't believe me, then one of the things I suggest is that you pick up a copy of a book called Visible Learning. It's by a guy named John Hattie. And really, this book is considered a benchmark when it comes to evidence-based teaching. Well, certainly they may observe what they think is a particular learning style, but in reality, their assessment of a student's learning styles are hardly any better than really random guessing. So there's one particular study done by these guys named Holt, Denny, Capps, and DeVore. They found that teachers were able to correctly assess learning styles 30% of the time when compared to a formal assessment. And then when simple random guessing was employed, learning styles were correctly assessed 25% of the time. So not only is the idea of individual learning styles questionable here, but the average teacher's ability to recognize and assess a child's learning style is it's really problematic at best. So if your child's classroom teacher is unable to correctly assess learning styles most of the time, what confidence should we have in his or her ability to adapt lessons and teaching approaches appropriately? Well, formal learning style assessments are, they're extremely problematic. And why? Because they really never account for changing variables. So let me put it another way. A student who undertakes a formal learning styles assessment, he or she may learn that they're a visual learner. Yet when the test is administered a second or maybe a third time, it may be determined that that student is in fact an auditory or maybe a kinesthetic learner. So you see, these assessments typically ask students how they prefer to learn in a particular situation. Yet there's no correlation between preference and outcome. So, for example, your child may have been categorized, let's say, as a visual learner. However, if your son or daughter is learning how to, let's say, properly swing a golf club, so watching videos of, they do it by watching videos of professional golfers, even really detailed ones, this is not going to cause your child to consistently drive a golf ball with distance and accuracy. And in this case, your child would have to be taught directly with club in hand and hours of practice. Have to be taught how to successfully drive a ball down the fairway. And in this case, visual learning leads to poor outcomes, while a kinesthetic approach, which is handling the clubs, leads to a far more successful outcome. So would your child be a visual learner or a kinesthetic learner in this case? Well, that depends on the situation. Well, as you can see, structuring classroom instruction according to individual learning styles of each student is pretty questionable. It's not only questionable in terms of academic outcomes, it's also largely impractical. So imagine attempting to teach or even facilitate lessons while accounting for the various learning styles of the students in the classroom. So this leads to really management chaos, unequal grading and assessment, and really inevitable gaps in learning. Does this mean that teachers should look for ways to add variety in the way they teach? Well, absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. In fact, the best teachers do this all the time, since it keeps things interesting, students motivated, and it really prepares kids for learning new information in different ways. And, as much as learning styles feel right, we need to understand that in terms of academic success and learning, there's very little evidence, actually none, that first, demonstrate that learning styles exist, and second, that there's any relationship between learning styles and effective learning.